13 years had passed since the last goodbye. And yet when the lion fell just beyond the schoolyard fence, broken, bleeding and barely breathing, it wasn't fear that gripped the quiet teacher. It was something deeper, older, a pull that defied reason, as if time itself cracked open and spilled memory into the dust. His feet moved before thought, his heart pounding. Not with terror, but with something dangerously close to hope. Because in the beast's fading golden eyes, he saw not a stranger, but a shadow. From a life he'd buried, a name he hadn't spoken in over a decade, a presence he had mourned in silence. And now, here it was. Real, impossible, and waiting a connection. Once torn, now stretching across time through pain and memory. And something neither man nor nature could ever fully name. Each morning began the same way, sunlight spilling over the cracked earth, the sound of wooden desks shifting inside the classroom, the smell of chalk dust and boiling tea. Mr. Karanja moved through it all with a kind of practiced grace, soft-spoken, steady. His shoes always brushed his books, always neatly stacked, yet nothing about him ever truly touched the present. His smile polite but absent, his eyes drawn often to the edge of the hills where the grass ran wild and gold. Sometimes he'd pause, mid-sentence in a lesson gaze, fixed on something no one else could see. A silence stretching between words like a breath, held too long. When he walked home alone, after school he'd take the longer path, the one that curved near the acacia tree, where something once waited for him. He'd run his fingers along the bark, not thinking, not remembering, but still returning every evening in his modest house. A bowl sat on the shelf, worn smooth at the edges, untouched, but never moved. Next to it a photograph. Face down under an old newspaper, the radio played quietly in the background, voices telling stories he never listened to in the night. He often woke before dawn, standing at the door, as if expecting movement in the distance. But there was only wind. The stillness around him was not peace. It was the weight of something unfinished, something missing. Not loud, not obvious, just always. There like a pulse beneath the skin. Something waiting with quiet patience to be remembered. It happened on a morning thick with heat and silence, the kind of silence that presses against your chest, as if the world itself is holding its breath. Men in uniforms came with clipped words and rehearsed sympathy. Their trucks loud against the soft. Earth Simba, now fully grown, paced behind the house, sensing the shift. The wrongness Karanja, barely 17, stood in the doorway, torn between obedience and something more primal. The boy in him screamed, "Stay the line in the field," mirrored that cry. With restless golden eyes, the men said it was for safety, that wild things belonged in the wild, that he'd be taken to a sanctuary far from here, safe, protected, unnamed and unseen. Karanja nodded, not because he agreed, but because he couldn't speak, not through the lump rising like stone in his throat when they loaded Simba into the cage. The lion's muscles tensed, but he didn't fight. Instead, he turned his head one last time, locking eyes with the boy who had saved him, raised him, loved him in silence. A question passed between them, a question without answer, and then the truck pulled away, dust swallowing everything familiar. Karanja stood for hours after the sound faded, a part of him unwilling to believe it was real, and something inside him hardened, not in anger, but in ache. He stopped laughing, stopped running. The world tilted and never righted. The days turned to years in which he moved like a man underwater. Slow, careful, distant people said he was thoughtful, but it wasn't thought, it was absence. He filled notebooks with lessons he no longer read. His evenings passed in silence. No fire, no stories, no music. He walked the same paths alone, never quite looking at the horizon, as if afraid of what it wouldn't show. 13 years stretched like shadow. Long and hollow each season came and went, but the silence inside him never changed. It simply settled deeper until it became part of his breath. Let me pause here for just a moment. Tell me, where are you listening from right now? Have you ever had someone, maybe a person, maybe even an animal, remember you after years apart? That quiet kind of recognition that hits deeper than words. If stories like this speak to something in you, go ahead and follow. There's much more ahead, and it only gets more heartfelt from here. It started not with sound, but with scent. A dry wind carrying something wild and faintly familiar. Dust and blood, and something older than either in the middle of a lesson chalk in hand. Karanja paused the words on the board, half finished, a chill crawling through his spine. Then came the roar, fractured roar. Not the voice of a predator, but of something reaching beyond pain. The schoolyard froze. Children's laughter, cut clean from the air, and then they saw it, a lion, staggering from the brush thin. Wounded, his mane tangled with thorns, he moved like a shadow, collapsing just feet from the school fence. Panic exploded around him, teachers yelling, doors slamming, but Karanja didn't move. Not away, he moved forward slowly, as if in a dream, each step, peeling back the years. Something in the lion's face pulled at him, sharp and aching. Not just the eyes, but the way he held his head, defiant, even in defeat. His body screamed stranger. But something else whispered home. Karanja stood at the edge of the fence, heart hammering, caught between two worlds. The teacher and the boy. The present and a past he'd buried. Deep, what if it wasn't him? What if it was and he'd forgotten? What if he remembered and it hurt more than being forgotten? He felt his legs weaken under the weight of so many questions. His mind spiraling through images, dusty paws on stone nights lit by firelight, the sound of breathing not quite human, not quite beast, and one name echoing louder than all fear. Simba, the name he had not spoken aloud in 13 years, trembled on his lips, and in that moment clarity came, not certainty, not safety, but something more dangerous. The unbearable hope that some bonds survive the silence, some loves wait without promise and without blame, and as his hand reached for the gate, he knew there would be no turning back. The world narrowed to breath and dust, and the dull thud of Karanja's heart as he stepped past the fence. The voices behind him fell away like echoes underwater. All that remained was the shape of the lion sprawled in the dirt, ribs rising too slowly, eyes half lidded with pain and something deeper. Karanja moved closer, knees lowering into the earth, each inch forward, shaking with the weight of what might be his hand, hovered just above the lion's mane, unsure, unwilling to touch a memory that might vanish if confirmed. The lion's breath hitched, nostrils flaring as if tasting the air for something long gone, and then those eyes opened, golden dim, but clear enough to see through him, a beat past, then another. The silence between them thick with memory and hesitation. Karanja whispered the name low, like prayer, like apology. Simba. The lion flinched almost imperceptibly, a flicker in the eyes, a ripple in the stillness. Then slowly he lifted his head. Muscles trembling with the effort, their faces inches apart. Karanja didn't breathe, didn't blink. Then came the moment, soft and devastating. Simba leaned in, no growl, no tension. Just a long, broken exhale as his massive brow came to rest against the man's chest. The weight of him, not just physical, but unbearably familiar. Karanja's hand fell gently to the lion's neck, fingers burying into the thick, coarse mane. A sob escaped him, uninvited, quiet and raw. And in that single motion, the years dissolved, no ceremony, no music, just the quiet collapse of distance and silence, and time recognition surged between them. Wordless, complete. The lion remembered the boy, and the man never stopped waiting. Everything else disappeared. The gasps from the schoolyard, the whispers from behind windows, even the fear. Inside him, all gone, what remained was this impossible, fragile truth that after all this time, they still belonged to each other. In the days that followed, the air around the school seemed different. Not louder, not brighter, but fuller, as if the silence had shifted into something gentler. Simba lay beneath the shade of an old fig tree, not caged, not guarded, simply resting, and Karanja was always near, never hovering, never rushing, just present, a bowl of water placed quietly beside the lion's paws. His movements slow, deliberate, filled with something that looked like reverence. Sometimes he read aloud, not expecting understanding, just offering presence. his voice weaving through the warm air stories of faraway kings and lost brothers. Children who once stared from behind windows, now edged closer, little hands leaving fruit or folded drawings near the lion's resting place. Whispers became laughter, and eventually Simba lifted his head to meet their eyes. No growl, no fear, just tired curiosity. And then one afternoon a child reached out, and Simba did not pull away. Karanja watched this moment unfold like something sacred, the breaking of a wall brick by silent brick. He began to walk differently. Shoulders looser, steps lighter. He smiled more, though only when no one was looking. Sometimes Simba would nudge him playfully, a slow swipe of the paw or a gentle press of the head, and Karanja would laugh that same rare quiet laugh, like something finally unknotted. They did not speak the way humans do, or even the way they once did, but everything that mattered passed between them in glances, in shared stillness, in the way. Karanja's hand found the space behind Simba's ear, with the ease of memory, and the lion leaned into it, with the trust of something finally safe, when the time came, and Simba stood once more at the edge of the wild strong. Again, whole again, he turned, once before disappearing into the brush, and Karanja nodded. No fear, no pleading, just the knowing that this was not the end. And true enough, every few weeks at dawn, Simba returned, not with fanfare, but with presence, standing silently beyond the school fence waiting, and Karanja would meet him hand over heart, the same way he had on that first impossible day. Their bond no longer broken, but renewed, not with words but with returning, and in that quiet ritual, the world felt steady again, because some loves are not undone by time or silence, they simply sleep until the heart is ready to remember. Some bonds speak in silence, not because there are no words, but because none are needed. They move beneath time through distance, and forgetting waiting with quiet patience, not to be remembered, but to be felt. And when they return, they do not ask why or how, only that you open the door when they knock, because true connection does not break, it becomes part of you, woven into the way you look at the world, the way you pause, without knowing why. Karanja no longer walks with the same ache, and Simba no longer wanders with the same weight. Something between them was mended, not like before, but in a way, deeper, quieter, more enduring. And though they will part again, they no longer fear the silence between them, because they have learned what only time can teach. Some things never really leave, they just wait for the moment we are finally ready to see them again.